Captain Derek Solis moved silently through the ruins of the battle-scarred outpost, his senses sharp and ready. His mission was simple: eliminate any remaining threats and report back to his unit. The Amazonians of Zenith, known for their brutal combat prowess, had been a thorn in the side of human forces for months. Among their ranks was a legendary warrior, Arya, a name whispered in dread among his fellow soldiers. She was said to be unstoppable, a force of nature on the battlefield. As Derek approached a dilapidated structure at the edge of the outpost, a flicker of movement caught his eye. He raised his weapon, every muscle in his body coiled and ready to strike. There, amid the rubble, lay an Amazonian warrior, her body slumped against the remains of a collapsed wall. Blood oozed from a gash on her arm, staining the earth beneath her. Derek's pulse quickened. This was no ordinary Amazon. Her silver eyes, half closed in pain, opened when she sensed his approach. Her gaze met his with defiance, though her body was weakened by injury. It was her, Arya. Expecting the end, Arya's lips curled into a bitter smile, her voice hoarse but filled with contempt. "Go on, human. Finish it. I know how this ends." Derek stared at her, his finger poised on the trigger. Yet something in her eyes, perhaps the way they flickered with both pride and exhaustion, made him hesitate. He had faced countless enemies before, but this time, something was different. Instead of firing, Derek slowly lowered his weapon. "I'm not here to kill an unarmed fighter," he said, his voice steady but softer than he intended. Arya's brow furrowed in confusion, her body tensing despite her injury. "Is this some kind of game? A trick?" "No game," Derek replied, crouching down beside her. "Just not the killing kind today." Arya's gaze narrowed as Derek reached into his pack, pulling out a small med kit. She watched, wariness creeping into her features, as he began to tend to her wound. The blood on her arm had clotted, but the gash was deep, too severe for her to walk without aid. Yet she couldn't comprehend what this human was doing. "Why are you helping me?" she demanded, her voice dripping with suspicion. "I'm your enemy. We've been killing each other's kind for cycles." Derek remained focused on bandaging her arm, his hands precise and practiced. "Maybe I'm tired of the killing," he said, glancing up briefly. "Or maybe I've seen enough of it to know that it doesn't solve anything." Arya's expression softened slightly, though her guard remained high. She had been trained to view humans as ruthless conquerors, their only goal to subjugate her people. But this man, this soldier, was different. He didn't see her as just another target. As the pain from her wound lessened under his care, Arya allowed herself to ask the question that had been gnawing at her. "What is your name, human?" "Derek Solis," he replied, his eyes meeting hers for a moment. "Captain?" Arya nodded, her breath still ragged but her mind slowly beginning to clear. "Arya, warrior of Zenith," Derek chuckled lightly. "I know who you are. They tell stories about you in the ranks, legendary fighter, impossible to defeat. Yet here I am," she said with a wry smile, "fallen before a human." The silence stretched between them, thick with the weight of their respective worlds. They had been enemies only moments ago, and now they sat side by side, linked by something unspoken. Derek's voice broke the quiet. "You're not defeated, Arya. Not yet." Her silver eyes flickered with curiosity. "What do you intend to do now, Captain Solis?" Derek stood extending a hand to her. "For now, we survive, together." Arya stared at his hand for a long moment, the tension in her mind battling with the instincts that had been drilled into her for years. Then, with a slow nod, she took his hand, allowing him to pull her to her feet. As they moved away from the outpost, their truce tentative but real, both knew that the next steps they took would not just decide their fate, but potentially the future of their people. Derek and Arya moved cautiously through the wreckage of the outpost, the tension between them palpable. The silence was broken only by the crunch of debris beneath their boots as they navigated through the ruins. Though Derek had saved her, Arya remained on guard, her silver eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of danger or betrayal. They found temporary shelter in the hollowed remains of a fallen building. The wind howled through broken windows, carrying with it the distant echoes of ongoing battles, reminders of the war still raging outside their small truce. "You didn't answer my question," Arya said, breaking the silence as they huddled by a small fire Derek had managed to start. "Why did you spare me?" Derek sat across from her, the firelight flickering in his eyes. I've been in this war for too long, he admitted. I've seen too much death on both sides. Maybe I just wanted to do something different for once. Arya's gaze remained skeptical. Different doesn't win wars, Captain. Compassion doesn't stop your people from taking my world. Derek met her eyes, his expression serious. Maybe not. But what we're doing now, surviving together, that could mean something more. It doesn't have to be about taking or conquering. Arya's jaw tightened. Her entire life had been about fighting for her people's survival against the human invaders. The idea that one human could see things differently was almost laughable. Yet, here he was, sitting across from her, tending her wounds and offering an alliance, however fragile it might be. For the first time, Arya felt something stir in her chest that wasn't hatred or anger. She didn't trust him fully, how could she? But she also didn't see him as just another enemy. Your kindness is wasted on me, Arya said, her tone softening despite her words. When the time comes, I won't hesitate to fight you again. Derek's lips curved into a faint smile. Maybe it won't come to that. Arya scoffed but didn't press further. They both knew the reality. They were enemies in a war too big for them to stop. Yet in this moment, a small part of her wished his words could be true. The following morning, the uneasy peace between them was shattered when they heard the distinct sound of heavy footsteps approaching from the distance. Derek instinctively reached for his weapon, and Arya, though still weakened, prepared for a fight. The unmistakable sound of human combat suits echoed through the ruins, a rescue team sent to extract Derek. They'll kill me on sight, Arya said, her voice low and urgent. Your people will see me as nothing more than another Amazon to eliminate. Derek cursed under his breath. He knew she was right. If his team found her, they would follow their orders to the letter, and Arya would be executed without question. His mind raced as he weighed his options. He had to act fast. Hide, he ordered, grabbing her arm and pulling her toward a collapsed structure nearby. I'll handle this. Arya hesitated, her pride warring with the reality of her situation. But the look in Derek's eyes, determined, protective, convinced her to follow his lead. She slipped into the shadows as Derek stepped out to meet the incoming soldiers. Captain Solas. A squad of heavily armed human soldiers emerged from the rubble, their weapons drawn and ready. The squad leader, a grizzled man named Sykes, approached Derek with a mixture of relief and suspicion. We received your distress signal, Sykes said, scanning the area. What happened here? Derek swallowed hard, knowing the truth would complicate things. Ambush, he replied, keeping his voice steady. The Amazons hit us hard. I'm the only one who made it. Sykes frowned, his eyes narrowing as he looked around. And you survived on your own? Derek nodded, trying to maintain his composure. Barely. I've been holed up here, waiting for extraction. The squad leader seemed unconvinced, his gaze lingering on the ruins behind Derek. We'll sweep the area just to be sure. Derek's heart raced. If they found Arya, it would all be over. He needed to buy her time. No need, he said quickly. I scouted the area myself, nothing but corpses. Sykes stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to gauge whether Derek was telling the truth. Finally, he nodded, signaling for his men to stand down. All right, Captain, let's get you out of here. We've got a transport ship waiting. Derek breathed a silent sigh of relief, led the way. As they turned to leave, Derek glanced back at the spot where Arya was hiding, his eyes meeting hers for a split second. The look in her eyes was one of gratitude, mixed with confusion. He had risked everything to protect her, a sworn enemy, and she wasn't sure why. When the soldiers were far enough away, Arya emerged from the shadows, her body tense, but her heart conflicted. She couldn't deny what Derek had done for her. He had saved her life again, despite every reason not to. Why? She asked quietly as she approached him. Why risk everything for me? Derek looked at her, the weight of his decision clear in his eyes. Because you're not my enemy, Arya. Not anymore. For the first time in her life, Arya found herself speechless. This human, this man had turned her world upside down. She had expected him to kill her, but instead he had saved her. Twice. And with each act of mercy, the walls around her heart began to crack. Without another word, they continued walking, both aware that something deeper had begun between them. Something neither had expected, but neither could deny. Days passed, and the unspoken connection between Derek and Arya deepened, though the war between their people loomed ever larger over their heads. They continued to move through the wilderness, evading human patrols and Amazonian scouts alike, each step drawing them closer to safety, but further into dangerous territory, both physically and emotionally. One evening, as they made camp in a secluded valley, Derek could sense the tension growing between them. Arya had been quieter than usual, her silver eyes distant, as though she was grappling with an internal struggle. He had tried to ignore it, focusing on the immediate task of survival. But now, sitting across from her in the dim light of the fire, the silence felt unbearable. "You've been distant," Derek said, finally breaking the stillness. His voice was calm, but there was a hint of concern beneath the words. "Something's bothering you." Arya didn't meet his gaze at first, her eyes fixed on the flames dancing before her. She had been fighting an internal war for days, one she could no longer ignore. "You're a human," she said after a long pause, her tone sharp. "I'm supposed to hate you. I'm supposed to want you dead." Derek's heart clenched, but he remained silent, letting her speak. Arya's voice grew harder, as though she was trying to convince herself of the truth she had always known. "My entire life, I've been taught that your kind is ruthless, that there's no room for trust. But you've shown me something different. I don't understand it." Derek leaned forward, his eyes softening. "Maybe because there's more to us than what we've been taught to believe. The same way there's more to you than being just an Amazon warrior." Arya's silver eyes flashed with emotion, and for a moment, her guard dropped. "You don't understand." She gestured between them. "This isn't supposed to happen. I've fought against your kind for years. I've lost people I loved to your soldiers." Her words hit him like a punch, but Derek didn't flinch. He knew the cost of this war. He had lost comrades too. But what they had now, this fragile connection, was real, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. "I know," he said softly. "I've lost people too. But this war, it doesn't define us. It doesn't have to be the only thing between us." Arya looked at him, her defenses crumbling bit by bit. She hated the conflict within herself, the part of her that had begun to care for this human, this man who had risked his life for her, time and again. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm scared that, if I let myself trust you, it'll all fall apart, that we'll be forced back into being enemies again." Derek reached across the fire, his hand outstretched. "We don't have to be enemies, Arya. We can choose something different." For a long moment, she stared at his hand, her heart pounding in her chest. Then slowly, she reached out and took it. Their hands clasped, a silent promise forming between them. In that moment, they weren't just human and Amazon. They were Derek and Arya, two souls caught in a war they didn't want to fight, but bound together by something stronger than their differences. The next morning, their newfound connection was tested as they encountered an unexpected obstacle. While scouting ahead, Derek spotted a group of Amazonian fighters, Arya's people, moving through the nearby forest. They were on patrol, searching for stragglers from the previous battle. If they found Derek, they would kill him without hesitation. Derek immediately signaled Arya, who had been gathering supplies. She quickly crouched beside him, her expression grim as she recognized the crest on the warrior's armor. "It's my squad," she whispered, her voice laced with urgency. "If they see you with me, they'll assume the worst." Derek's heart sank. He knew what this meant. He would be seen as a prisoner or worse, a traitor collaborating with the enemy. "What do we do?" he asked, keeping his voice low. Arya's mind raced. Her loyalty to her people was absolute. But Derek had become more than just an enemy. She couldn't let them kill him. "You stay here," she said firmly. "I'll talk to them, convince them I'm alone." Derek grabbed her arm, his eyes searching hers for reassurance. "Arya, if they catch on." "They won't," she interrupted, though the uncertainty in her voice betrayed her fear. "I can handle this. Trust me." Reluctantly, Derek let her go, watching as she stood and moved toward the squad of Amazonian fighters. As she approached, she raised her hand in a sign of peace, and the leader of the group, Commander Tira, lowered her weapon slightly. "Arya," Tira said, her voice filled with relief. "We thought you were dead. We've been searching for you since the battle." Arya nodded, trying to keep her voice steady. "I was injured, but I managed to evade the humans. I've been hiding, recovering." Tira's sharp gaze scanned the area. "And the human soldiers? Did you encounter any of them? Arya hesitated, a flicker of guilt crossing her face. No, I've been alone. For a moment it seemed as though Tira accepted her words, but then another Amazonian warrior stepped forward, Lyra, a fierce soldier known for her keen instincts. She studied Arya closely, her eyes narrowing. You're lying, Lyra said, her voice cold. You smell like human blood. Arya's heart skipped a beat, but she forced herself to remain calm. I fought them, yes, but I escaped. Lyra wasn't convinced. She took a step closer, her hand hovering near her weapon. If you fought them, why do you still wear their scent? And why does it seem like you're hiding something? Arya's mind raced. She couldn't let them discover Derek, but she also couldn't let them suspect her of betrayal. Her connection with Derek had already made her question everything, and now that connection was about to cost her dearly. Just as Lyra moved to push past her, Derek stepped out of the shadows, his hands raised in surrender. Wait, he called, his voice steady despite the danger. I'm the human you're looking for. Arya's eyes widened in horror. Derek, no. Tira's sword was out in an instant, her eyes blazing with anger. So it's true. You've been helping him, Arya. You've betrayed us. Derek's gaze flicked between Arya and her comrades. She hasn't betrayed anyone, he said firmly. We're just trying to survive. Tira sneered, her sword glinting in the sunlight. And you think that justifies her helping a human? You're both traitors to your kind. Arya's heart pounded as she realized the gravity of the situation. She had made her choice, but now it was clear that there would be no going back. With Derek by her side, she stood against her people, knowing that their connection, what they had built together, was worth fighting for, even if it meant becoming an outcast in her own world. Together, they faced the wrath of the Amazonian fighters, knowing that their love and their alliance would have to survive not only the battlefield, but the betrayals of those they had once called family. Derek stood shoulder to shoulder with Arya, facing the Amazonian warriors who had once been her comrades. The tension was palpable, the air thick with the expectation of violence. Derek's pulse raced as he gauged the situation. The Amazonians were skilled, formidable fighters. One wrong move and he and Arya would both be cut down. Commander Tira's eyes blazed with fury. You've lost your way, Arya? You side with the enemy? With a human? Arya's heart pounded, but she refused to let her fear show. He's not our enemy, she said, her voice firm. Derek saved my life. He's different. Tira sneered, her sword still raised. Different? They've killed our people, burned our cities, and yet you stand here defending him? Arya took a step forward, her silver eyes burning with determination. I know what the humans have done. But this war, it's been waged for so long, none of us remember why it started. All we know is hate, and I won't be part of it anymore. Lyra, standing beside Tira, growled in anger. You're a traitor, Arya. You deserve to die alongside this human. Derek tightened his grip on his weapon, prepared for the worst, but Arya raised her hand, signaling him to stand down. I won't fight you, she said, her voice steady, but if you force this, I will defend him. The warriors exchanged glances, clearly torn. They respected Arya, had fought alongside her for years, but now they saw her as a traitor. Tira stepped closer, her blade pointed at Arya's chest. You've left us no choice, Tira said coldly. You've chosen your side. In a blur of movement, the fight erupted. Lyra charged at Derek, her sword aimed for his heart, while Tira slashed at Arya. Steel clashed, and the sounds of battle filled the air. Derek blocked Lyra's strike, his training kicking in as he fought to hold her back. The Amazon warriors were quick and precise, but Derek had faced overwhelming odds before. He dodged her blows, using his speed and agility to outmaneuver her. Arya, meanwhile, faced Tira in a brutal dance of swordplay. Their strikes were powerful, each woman fully committed to the fight. The air crackled with the tension between them, their shared history adding weight to every blow. You don't have to do this, Tira, Arya shouted as their blades met in a shower of sparks. You've betrayed everything we stand for, Tira snarled, pushing her back. Arya's heart ached with the knowledge that there would be no reconciliation. She had chosen Derek, chosen a path of peace, and now she was paying the price. With a swift movement, she disarmed Tira, knocking the blade from her hand and sending it clattering to the ground. Tira stumbled back, breathing heavily, rage still burning in her eyes. But before she could retaliate, Derek brought Lyra to the ground, pinning her beneath his knee, his weapon aimed at her throat. "Enough!" Derek shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. For a moment, everything stopped. Tira, panting and weaponless, stared at Arya, her expression a mix of fury and disbelief. Lyra struggled beneath Derek's grip, but he held her firm. "This doesn't have to end in bloodshed," Derek said, his voice calm but authoritative. "We're not your enemies. Arya and I just want to live in peace." Tira's chest heaved as she glared at them, but slowly her shoulders slumped. "You'll be hunted," she said bitterly. "Both of you. The Amazons won't forgive this." Arya sheathed her weapon, her voice heavy with the weight of what had just transpired. "Then we'll face that together." Derek released Lyra, stepping back cautiously. The warriors, still brimming with anger, retreated, leaving Derek and Arya alone in the clearing, now branded as traitors by both their people. News of Arya's betrayal spread quickly. The Amazon warriors had returned to their stronghold, telling tales of how Arya had sided with a human, how she had turned her back on her people to fight alongside their enemy. It wasn't long before both human and Amazon forces branded Derek and Arya as fugitives. Their days became a blur of constant movement, always staying ahead of the patrols sent to hunt them down. With each passing day, their bond deepened, forged in the fires of survival. They shared more than just their need to evade capture. They shared their thoughts, their dreams of a world beyond war, where their love could exist without fear. One night, as they rested in the shelter of a cave hidden deep within the forest, Derek sat beside Arya, his arm wrapped around her as they stared out at the stars. The night was peaceful, but the weight of their situation hung over them like a cloud. "We can't run forever," Derek said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Arya leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder. "I know, but what else can we do? Both our people want us dead." Derek sighed, his fingers tracing patterns on her arm. "We need to find a way to end this. This war, it's tearing everything apart. There has to be a way to stop it." Arya's silver eyes flickered with sadness. "I've been fighting my whole life, Derek. I don't know if peace is possible." He looked at her, his heart aching for the woman who had been raised in a world of constant conflict. "If we don't try, then nothing will ever change." They sat in silence for a long time, the stars twinkling above them like distant beacons of hope. Arya's hand found his, and she squeezed it gently. Maybe there's a way," she said softly. "If we can reach the Zenith Council, my people's ruling body, they have the power to negotiate a ceasefire. But it's risky. If they don't listen, we'll be executed on sight." Derek's grip on her hand tightened. "Then we'll take that risk. Together." Arya smiled, her heart swelling with a mix of fear and hope. She had always been a fighter, always believed that victory came through strength and violence. But now, with Derek by her side, she saw a different path, a path toward something greater than just survival. The next day, they began their journey to the Amazonian capital, determined to confront the Zenith Council and present their case for peace. They knew the odds were against them, but they had no choice. If they failed, the war would continue, and they would forever be hunted. But if they succeeded, they could change everything. As they moved through the dense jungle, their hearts heavy with the weight of their mission, they clung to the hope that their love could bridge the divide between their worlds. And maybe, just maybe, they could bring an end to the war that had torn them apart. The journey to the Amazonian capital was perilous. Derek and Arya moved through treacherous terrain, evading patrols and enduring harsh conditions. Each step brought them closer to the Zenith Council, but also deeper into enemy territory. Both knew that their mission was fraught with danger. If the Council refused to listen, execution was all but certain. As they approached the towering city of Zephyra, a fortress of gleaming spires nestled in the heart of the jungle, Derek felt a knot of tension in his chest. This was Arya's home, but it was also the heart of the Amazon war effort, a place where humans were seen as enemies to be destroyed. Arya, walking beside him, sensed his unease. "This won't be easy," she said softly, her silver eyes scanning the horizon. "But it's the only chance we have. If we can get an audience with the Council, they might listen." Derek nodded, his hand resting on the hilt of his weapon. "And if they don't?" Arya's gaze hardened. "Then we make them." The streets of Zephyra were heavily guarded, and it wasn't long before they were spotted by Amazonian scouts. A squadron of armored warriors quickly surrounded them, their weapons raised, ready to strike. The leader of the group stepped forward, her eyes narrowing in disbelief as she recognized Arya. "Arya?" she hissed, her voice filled with betrayal. "You dare return here with a human?" Arya stood tall, her voice steady. "I need to speak with the council. It's urgent." The warrior's eyes flashed with anger. "You're a traitor, Arya. You think the council will grant you an audience after what you've done?" Derek stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "We're here to offer a chance for peace. We don't want more bloodshed." The warrior sneered. "Peace? You expect us to believe that?" Arya's eyes blazed with determination. "Believe what you want, but if you kill us now, you'll doom our people to endless war. Let us speak to the council. Let us try to stop this." There was a long pause as the warrior considered her options. Finally, she gave a sharp nod, signaling her soldiers to lower their weapons. "I'll take you to the council, but know this. If they refuse, your lives are forfeit." Derek and Arya exchanged a glance, their resolve unshaken. Together, they were led through the grand halls of Zafara, their fate resting in the hands of the Amazonian leaders. The Zenith Council chambers were vast and imposing, filled with high-ranking Amazonian officials, seated in a circular formation. At the head of the assembly sat Matriarch Kalith, the elder leader of the Amazons, her presence commanding and severe. As Derek and Arya were brought before the council, Kalith's eyes narrowed at the sight of the human standing beside one of her most decorated warriors. "Arya," she said, her voice cold and controlled, "you return to us not as a hero, but as a traitor, and with a human at your side." Arya stepped forward, her heart racing, but her voice unwavering. "Matriarch, I come before you not to fight, but to plead for an end to this war. We've been killing each other for too long. It doesn't have to be this way." Kalith's eyes flicked to Derek, her disdain evident. "You speak of peace, yet you bring the enemy into our sacred halls. Why should we trust anything you say?" Derek took a deep breath, stepping beside Arya. "Because we both want the same thing, a future where our people don't have to live in fear of each other. I've seen what this war does. It destroys families, entire worlds, but it doesn't have to continue." Kalith's expression darkened. "You are naive if you believe peace is possible. Your people have ravaged our lands, killed our warriors. How can we ever forgive that?" Arya's voice was filled with emotion as she responded. "Because if we don't, the cycle of hatred will never end. I know I've fought for this war my whole life, but I've seen what's possible. Derek spared me when he didn't have to. He showed me that not all humans are our enemies." The council members murmured among themselves, uncertainty rippling through the room. Kalith remained unmoved, her face like stone. "You've lost your way, Arya," she said coldly. "The Amazons cannot and will not negotiate with the very people who seek to destroy us." At that moment, the door to the chamber burst open, and Commander Tira stormed in, her face flushed with anger. "Matriarch, I warned you about this traitor. She has fought against her own people to protect that human." Tira's accusation hung in the air, and Derek's hand instinctively went to his weapon. But Arya didn't flinch. She turned to the council, her voice filled with resolve. "Do you not see? This war is built on lies and fear. We are no different from them. We fight because we are told to, not because we must. But there's another way. If we do not take this chance to seek peace, more will die. More of our sisters, more of our brothers. How much more blood must be spilled before we say enough?" The chamber fell into a heavy silence, Kalith's gaze piercing as she looked at Arya. For the first time, doubt flickered in the matriarch's eyes. Derek stepped forward, his voice strong. "This is not just about winning or losing, it's about finding a way forward. If we continue this war, both our people will be destroyed. But together, we can rebuild." Kalith's eyes softened, and she glanced around at the other members of the council. "What you propose is dangerous. Many of our people will not accept peace so easily. But they will follow your lead," Arya said. "They respect you. You have the power to end this." The council members exchanged glances, their expressions conflicted. Finally, Kalith stood, her gaze sweeping over the room. "We will consider your request for peace, but know this. If even one of your kind betrays us, there will be no mercy." Derek nodded solemnly. "We won't betray you." Kalith turned to the council. "It is decided. We will send envoys to the humans and begin negotiations. Relief washed over Derek and Arya as the Council's decision became clear. They had done it. Against all odds, they had planted the seed of peace. It was only the beginning of a long and difficult process, but it was a start. As they left the chamber side by side, Derek looked at Arya, his heart swelling with pride and affection. "We did it," he whispered. Arya smiled, her silver eyes shining. "We did." Together, they had defied the odds, broken the cycle of hatred, and forged a new path. Their love had not only saved their lives, but it had given their people a chance at peace, a future where war was no longer the only option. And as they walked into the light, hand in hand, they knew that whatever came next, they would face it together.